The Wild West wasn't just a man's world. While names like Billy the Kid dominate the history books, these 9 women were just as ruthless, just as terrifying, and twice as mysterious. Welcome to Vintage Shots. Today, we're uncovering the dark secrets behind vintage photos of the frontier's most notorious female outlaws. Don't forget to share and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's dive in. 1. Pearl Hart, 1871 to December 30th, 1955. Our first story takes us to the year 1999 and centers on a woman whose name would ring through the canyons of Arizona. Pearl Hart was born in Lindsay, Ontario, Canada, into a family that provided her with a prestigious education. But Pearl had a spirit that could not be contained by textbooks or social etiquette. At just 17, she eloped with Frederick Hart, a seductive gambler who promised her the world but gave her nothing but pain. Their marriage was a cycle of extreme physical abuse, and though Pearl bore him 2 children, she finally found the strength to leave him and head west. By the time she reached Arizona, Pearl was working as a cook in rough mining camps, barely scraping by. It was here that she received a heartbreaking letter. Her mother was dying back east. Desperate and penniless, Pearl shared her grief with an acquaintance named Joe Boot. Together, they hatched a plan that would go down in history. On May 30th, 1899, Pearl Hart did the unthinkable. She cut off her hair, donned a man's rugged clothing, and strapped a .38 caliber revolver to her hip. They ambushed a stagecoach near Globe, Arizona, making Pearl the first and only woman outlaw to successfully rob a stagecoach in the territory. They made off with over $400, roughly $15,000 today. But Pearl's strange sense of honor showed when she handed a few dollars back to the terrified victims so they could buy a meal. Their escape, however, was a failure. They got lost in the unforgiving desert and were captured by a posse sleeping just 3 miles from the crime scene. In court, Pearl was a sensation. She famously declared, "I shall not consent to be tried under a law in which my sex had no voice in making." Though initially acquitted by a charmed jury, she was rearrested and sent to Yuma Territorial Prison. In 1902, she pulled her final ruse, claiming she was pregnant. To avoid a political scandal, the governor pardoned her. Pearl lived until 1955, forever remembered as the Bandit Queen who challenged the law and won. Next, we look at the Rose of the Wild Bunch, Laura Bullion. Born in Kentucky in 1873, Laura was literally born into the world of crime. Her father was an outlaw with ties to the most famous gang in the West, the Wild Bunch, led by Butch Cassidy. By age 15, Laura was navigating the gritty underworld of San Antonio, working as a prostitute and learning the art of the deal. She was not merely a companion to outlaws, she was a critical operative for the gang. Laura was the gang's shadow. She was a master of logistics, specializing in forging signatures and laundering the hot money stolen from bank vaults and train safes. She ensured that the Wild Bunch always had fresh horses and safe houses waiting for them in the middle of nowhere. In this rare photograph, you can see the sharp intelligence in her eyes, a woman who could dress in high society silks one day and men's riding gear the next. She occasionally took an active role in the heists, standing side by side with men like Ben Kilpatrick, also known as the Tall Texan. On November 6, 1901, the law finally caught up with her in St. Louis. She was discovered with $8,500 in stolen cash from the Great Northern train robbery. At the time, that was an absolute fortune. After serving more than 3 years in prison, Laura did something that few outlaws ever manage. She walked away. She moved to Memphis, Tennessee, where she transformed herself into a respected seamstress and interior designer. She lived a long, quiet, and law-abiding life until 1961, being the last surviving member of the Wild Bunch. Her headstone is a poignant reminder of her past, carved with a thorny rose and the words, "The Thorny Rose." A life that began in the fire of the frontier ended in the peace of the city. The story of Belle Siddons, also known as Madame Vestal, is one of the most tragic descents in the history of the West. Born into a wealthy, politically connected plantation family in St. Louis, Belle was the epitome of a Southern belle, cultured, stunningly beautiful, and exceptionally intelligent. When the Civil War broke out, Belle was only in her 20s, but she used her social status to become a deadly spy for the Confederacy. She was eventually caught and imprisoned, but her true journey into the darkness of the frontier was just beginning. After the war, she moved to the booming towns of South Dakota, where she reinvented herself as a legendary card dealer. At the 21 tables, men were mesmerized by her elegance and sharp wit, but Belle was running a lethal game behind the scenes. She used her charm to flirt with stagecoach drivers, extracting precise details about gold shipments and travel routes. This information was then passed to her lover, the outlaw Archie Cummings, whose gang would lie in wait to ambush the coaches. For a time, they were unstoppable, amassing a fortune in stolen gold. But the law eventually broke the gang, and Cummings was executed. Belle was devastated, and her life began a downward spiral into the depths of depression. She turned to opium and alcohol to numb her pain, eventually losing everything she owned. She tried to reclaim her life by opening a musical theater in Nevada under a stage name, but a catastrophic fire burnt it to the ground. Broken and penniless, Belle became a wanderer, a shadow of her former self. She was last seen in the early 1880s, a drunkard on the streets, her final days remaining a mystery to history. A woman who once commanded the attention of generals ended her life in the silence of the gutter. 4. Rose Dunn, September 5, 1878 to June 11, 1955. They called her the Rose of the Cimarron, and her legend is built on a foundation of fierce loyalty and romantic tragedy. Rose was born near Ingalls, Oklahoma, and educated in a convent, hardly the typical upbringing for an outlaw. However, her brothers were criminals who taught her to ride and shoot with the precision of a soldier. It was through them that she met George Bitter Creek Newcomb, a prominent member of the Wild Bunch. Rose fell deeply in love with him, and their romance became the stuff of frontier myth. The defining moment of Rose's life came during the Battle of Ingalls. As federal marshals descended on the town to capture the Doolin-Dalton gang, a massive shootout erupted. While bullets flew and men fell, Rose reportedly did something heroic. She didn't hide. Instead, she ran through a hail of gunfire to reach Newcomb, who was pinned down and wounded. She carried a rifle and extra ammunition to him, allowing him to fight his way out and escape to safety. But the story did not have a happy ending. Her own brothers, lured by the massive $5,000 bounty on Newcomb's head, eventually betrayed and killed him. Rose was accused by some of being the one who gave up his location, a stain on her reputation she spent the rest of her life denying. After the chaos of her youth, Rose settled down, married a local politician, and lived a quiet life until her death in 1955. Whether she was a devoted lover who risked everything or a traitor who sold out her heart, the Rose of the Cimarron remains one of the most debated figures of the Old West. 5. Sally Skull, 1817, missing circa 66. Sarah Jane Newman, famously known as Sally Skull, was a woman of raw, unadulterated power. Born into a pioneering Texas family, Sally didn't just survive the frontier, she dominated it. She grew up in an environment where defending one's land from Comanche raids was a daily reality. Legend says her mother once fought off an intruder by chopping off his toes with an axe, and Sally clearly inherited that terrifying strength. Sally was a legendary horse trader who operated in a man's world with absolute authority. Twice a year, she would travel alone into Mexico, returning with massive herds of horses. It was widely believed that most of these horses were stolen, but the law was too afraid of Sally to ever prove it. She famously wore men's clothing, strapped 2 revolvers to her waist, and was known to be a crack shot who never missed her target. She was a woman who took no disrespect, and she was feared by everyone who knew her name. But it was her personal life that cemented her infamy. Sally had 5 husbands throughout her life, and 2 of them died under extremely mysterious circumstances. Rumors persisted for decades that Sally had simply disposed of them when they no longer served her. She was a woman who answered to no one and feared nothing. In 1866, Sally Skull simply vanished from the face of the earth. There are no records of her death, no grave to visit, only the whispers of the Texas plains. Some say she was finally murdered. Others believe she retired to Mexico with a fortune in stolen gold. Her story is a ghost story that still haunts the history of Texas. Number 6. Mary Catherine Haroni, November 7, 1849 to November 2, 1940. History remembers her by the nickname Big Nose Kate, but Mary Catherine Haroni was a woman of immense culture, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty. Born into a wealthy and influential Hungarian family, she was highly educated before her parents died, leaving her an orphan at age 14. She ran away from her guardians and found herself in the world of saloons and dance halls, eventually meeting the legendary Doc Holliday. Kate was far more than just Holliday's companion. She was his equal in grit. She was fiercely independent and refused to be a victim of her circumstances. In one famous incident, when Holliday was being held by a mob that wanted to lynch him, Kate set fire to a hotel to create a distraction. Amidst the chaos, she drew her pistols and helped Holliday escape into the night. She was there in Tombstone during the most legendary days of the frontier, witnessing the build-up to the gunfight at the OK Corral. Kate lived through the bloodiest chapters of the West and survived long enough to see the era turn into a cinematic myth. Eventually, she settled in Arizona and lived a quiet, dignified life until her death in 1940. She was a woman who saw the true face of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, a woman who knew the real story behind the legends. Her long life was a bridge between the raw reality of the frontier and the polished stories we tell today.
7. Belle Starr, February 5, 1848 to February 3, 1889. Myra May Belle Shirley, better known as the Bandit Queen, Belle Starr, was born into Missouri's high society but chose a life of dust and lead. She was a highly educated woman, skilled in piano and classical languages, but her heart belonged to the wild side of the law. She associated with the James Younger gang and eventually married a horse thief named Jim Reed. After his death, she married Sam Starr, a Cherokee man from a notorious family of outlaws. Belle was a stickler for drama and style. She was known to ride through the streets of Indian Territory in a flowing black velvet habit, a plumed hat, and 2 pistols strapped to her waist. She turned her home into a sanctuary for the West's most wanted criminals, providing them with food, horses, and a place to hide from the law. In 1883, she was convicted of horse theft and served 9 months in a federal prison, maintaining a calm and regal demeanor the entire time. But her life was cut short by a cowardly ambush. In 1889, while riding home, Belle was shot twice and killed. To this day, The murder of Belle Starr remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the American West. The list of suspects was long, including her own son, with whom she had a volatile relationship, and several neighbors who held grudges against her. Belle Starr took her secrets to the grave, but her name remains synonymous with the rebellious spirit of the female outlaw. 8. Etta Place, circa 1878 to missing circa 1909. Etta Place is perhaps the most mysterious figure in the entire history of the Old West. As the companion of Butch Cassidy and the wife of the Sundance Kid, she was the heartbeat of the Wild Bunch. Yet, despite her proximity to the most famous outlaws in history, almost nothing is known about her origins. Was she a refined school teacher, a high-class prostitute, or was she actually the cattle thief Ann Bassett in disguise? The debate continues to this day. What we do know is that Etta was beautiful, cultured, and incredibly skilled with a rifle. She fled to South America with Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, participating in a string of bank robberies across the continent. She was the one who kept the two outlaws grounded as they tried to outrun the law. She was a woman who could navigate the high-end hotels of New York City and the rugged mountains of Bolivia with equal ease. In 1909, after the Sundance Kid was reportedly killed in a shootout, Etta Place simply vanished. There is no death certificate, no record of her return to the United States, and no grave. She stepped out of the spotlight and into the mists of legend. She was a woman who was there at the very end of the outlaw era and then chose to disappear rather than be captured. A true ghost of the frontier whose real identity remains locked in the past. Finally, we have Eleanor Dumont, the woman who would become known across the West as Madame Mustache. She arrived in Nevada City in '54, an elegant French-speaking woman who was a master of the gambling table. She opened a high-end casino called 21, and men flocked to her establishment, not just to gamble, but to be in the presence of such a refined and beautiful lady. She was incredibly successful until the gold in the California hills began to dry up. As the years passed and her fortune faded, Eleanor moved from town to town, following the next big strike. But the harsh life of the frontier began to take its toll. She developed a dark line of hair on her upper lip, which led to the cruel nickname she is known for today. She turned to running brothels and continued to gamble desperately, trying to reclaim the wealth and status she once possessed. In 1879, after a devastating night where she lost everything in a final game of cards, Eleanor Dumont took a fatal overdose of morphine. Her life, much like a high-stakes poker game, ended in a final, tragic fold. She was a woman who lived by her own rules in a world of men, and in the end, she chose to leave that world on her own terms.
These 9 women weren't just background characters in the story of the Old West. They were the architects of their own destiny. They proved that the frontier was a place where anyone, regardless of gender, could become a legend or a villain. Thanks for watching until the very end. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit share and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.